Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. Normally, we don't have a video here. We're in between album reviews, and there's usually just this pocket of nothing happening on Sundays, but given that it's Pride Month, I figure we can check out another LGBTQ artist. Today, we're going to be looking at a group called the Kilimanjaro Darkjazz Ensemble, recommended by Atze. So it seems like a perfect time to recommend one of my all-time favorite bands. Sadly, they're now disbanded, but the vocalist is non-binary. It's really hard to choose a single track, but All Is One is one, where they have a bigger presence compared to some others I was considering, so I think it's a good selection for this occasion. So that's what we're going to check out, Kilimanjaro Darkjazz Ensemble, All Is One. Let's see what they're bringing to the table. Is that a drum? These quick panning ideas, like ideas zipping by. It felt like we were in a triplet feel, and then we shifted to this, and it really feels like it wants to be 4/4, but it fluctuates.
Roads never ending. I walk.
Yeah, now we are in 4/4. I think our intro into this was Free Time, though.
I must be the only one. Wishes is all what I've kept from ancient time. Should I drop the line?
Ooh. Yeah, really love the cymbal ornamentation right here. Got that real meaty sub bass going on. These drifting ideas. Yeah. The way the melody shifts between voices. Yeah, really emotive playing with that harmon mute.
Nights never
When did we shift to steel brushes on that snare?
end. Nights never end.
Song fades out, trumpet just starts leaning into it hard. Like someone tapping on a microphone. A lot of silence here. Okay. Uh, Interesting. You know, it's called the Darkjazz Ensemble. I was expecting something jazzy coming into this, and I got it, but not in the way I was expecting. This is all over the place, genre-wise. There are little flecks of inspiration all over the place from a variety of ideas, and I'm not sure that the end result to me is jazz, but it's also one track from them. For all I know, this is more of an outlier. Um, the person who requested this, what was their name? Oh yeah, Atze. You know, they even said that this wasn't the track they necessarily would have requested if not for the fact that we were looking at LGBTQ people, and this one featured the vocalist more than other songs did. Not to say that it was a bad one, like they said, you know, they had a tough time picking one specific song, but maybe this one just doesn't necessarily represent their general sound, or maybe a more focused sound. Um, but you know, there is a jazzy element here, just as well as there is a classical element. A little bit of a rock element. Jazz has a rock style, so I mean, it'd probably just be closer to that. But you know, there is a little bit of a rock element in here. I'd say there's a poppiness to it. Uh, the vocals kind of lean into some, you know, 20s swing style of vocals, but I do think that they um, kind of are closer to a modern pop style of vocals. So I can even say there's some pop element in here, and techno, or just electronic music in general. This song's all over the place, but it works so well. And I think if you're not really paying attention to individual aspects and you're just absorbing it as a whole, dark jazz probably does a good job of demonstrating or uh, boiling down what they're doing into a single word for a genre. It's only when you start picking it apart that you kind of feel all these other influences here. The first thing I do want to talk about real quick is instruments, and it's primarily because they have a blend of instruments. Um, Although, you know, I say classical, but I don't think that there's actually much classical inspiration here. I mean, maybe some heavy use of counterpoint, but jazz can do that as well. Um, yeah, I mean, I primarily thought of classical because of our introductory instruments, but they never really came back. And you know, it's more the sound of jazz than anything else. You know, having a violin and a cello doesn't make your song classical, and I think I fell into that trap a little bit there. So, yeah, probably remove classical from that set of inspirations. They might have that inspiration somewhere. These two instruments might get utilized more often in another track, but for here, they're kind of set dressing. The song starts out with the most techno electronic oriented section, though. We have the strings, the violin, and the cello coming in. But prior to that, we just have these really low tones and sort of these sounds that kind of like bounce around or pan throughout. Um, and I can't really pinpoint an instrument on them, so I'm going to assume that they're a synthesizer, they're a crafted tone. Um, but it's not so much about whether the instruments are played or not, it's more about how they come together and what they're doing. Here at the beginning, we have an interesting parallel between this really low, bassy, sub bassy tone that just kind of fills out the low end, and then the cello that comes not too long after it that does the same job with a traditional instrument. It's a very interesting parallel that they have there, almost passing the idea from something imagined and digital, something that you could call a simulacra if you wanted to, into a traditional instrument and allowing it to carry an idea. I wonder if this is connected some way to the track before it on the album in a way that it transitions from the idea from the end of that album and then passes it to an instrument here, because honestly this opening minute and a half, I'd say, doesn't really line up with the rest of the track. That's something we'll get into with the structure, but it feels wholly divorced from it, especially since it's primarily created through electronic music and these two string instruments, and so much of that gets left behind when we enter the latter half of this track. But as it stands, I think it's a really neat idea, even if I don't think it flows uh, great into the song as a whole. Um, it has, like I said, that neat passing of the idea from a digital sound to an instrument. And we have a great setup to showcase the kind of music we're going to be hearing here. It is a blend of digital and acoustic. It is instruments that are played and have their natural timbre to them. It's instruments that are played with a digital tone that can be altered, like a synthesizer. And it's dark, it's moody, and we have a ton of production, high quality production going on, not just with the sound sphere and having just this big open area with a lot of width to it, but also utilizing that width in ways of motion. A lot of sounds move between sides. Even if we have a static element here and it doesn't move, it might have its pattern. It plays, its 4 beats or whatever, comes out and rests for 4 beats, and then comes back over here to repeat its pattern, to repeat the riff. Sounds bounce all over the place. There is excellent use of the entire sound sphere as a stage. And it's just really neat to hear this collaborative effort between something that typically is rather static, which is going to be a string duet. You don't typically watch a string duet and they play musical chairs while they're performing. They usually stay where they are. Their position is static, and their sound sphere is based entirely on the acoustics of the room, right? Um, so we're pairing this static element sonically with the more dynamic element of electronic music, and just really bringing them together and showing that they're not different at all. Like I said, we even passed one idea between realms, and it just continues on effortlessly. It's a really neat way of introducing both the production style and the compositional ideologies of the band. Um, and like I said, even if I don't think it flows real well into what is the meat of the song, what takes up the majority of the time here, I do really appreciate what they're presenting here. I think it's a great thesis statement for the band themselves, assuming that they continue on with ideas like this outside of this song. Now, I had talked about the transition being a bit rough, and we basically just do a crossfade. It's not a rough transition in effect, it's just a rough transition in that none of the ideas that were presented are showcased in the next section. We do have a continuation of theme, overall vibe, but otherwise, that's it. Even a lot of those instruments that we started with don't return, and a lot of it is more textural, so there's no returning of melody or anything like that. It is two wholly separate parts, and the best way that they could have thought to transition between them is to have one fade out while the other fades in. Now, what's interesting about this fade in, though, is that it feels like it starts connected to a semblance of the meter and tempo of that first section. It starts out with what feels to me as a triplet against some of the stuff that the strings are doing. But it quickly stops that in a way that feels abrupt because it basically has this home chord that it plays. And that's its downbeat. That's its beat one, right? Although eventually it'll change, but it's a beat one right here. We hear bum 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 bum. That's our triplet, right? We got the 1 2 3 1 2 3, and the one is hitting the key, the chord. Sorry. When we come out of this section, though, and the strings are pretty much completely faded out, we land back on that same chord, but if I count out the 1 2 3, we don't play it again on the 1. In fact, it seems like we sit in a silence for quite some time here, and then it plays again. Huh? And then there's a bit of silence again, and we play it again, but it feels like the silence was longer this time. And the next time it comes in, it feels like the silence was shorter. And I had mentioned, we're in this vague idea of time for like 20 seconds or so, and then the vocals come in, and we hit a rigid 4/4 with a set tempo. And the idea continues though. We have the same chord being hit on beats 1 and 3. I think there is a progression. I think the one on 3 is a different. That's what it is. It's not one chord. It bounces between two chords. That's what it is. But anyways, we have the chords on 1 and 3 now. So we have 1 2 3 4. 1 2 3 4. 4 4, right? 4 beats per bar. And we have this accent on beats 1 and 3. And it's odd because it feels like it fits into what came before it, but what came before it also had varying lengths between the chord changes. So the best I can say is that it was some sort of fairly close to where we were going, but also free time, where the pianist was allowed to change the chord when they felt right. If they wanted to let the silence linger a little longer, they were allowed to. Basically, the pianist controlled the tempo of this section fluidly because they were the only instrument at the time. And after they hit their chord, 8 times or whatever, the ninth time would have to be the time when the vocalist comes in and we're going to return to a rigid tempo. There's usually going to be some sort of head nod or something, more exaggerated hand movement so that the vocalist and the drummer can see, okay, when this comes in, we're starting for realsies, like the whole band's in on this, we got a tempo, that kind of vibe. And then the pianist plays it and the vocals come in, drums come in, and from there we have our set tempo. That's probably how it's done live. That's how I would do it live. It's a pretty standard way of doing it. But yeah, so I call that the free time section. I don't think that there is a tempo there. Or if you want to think about it a different way, I don't think there's a time signature there. The important part is that nobody's keeping track of the meter or the tempo. It's completely up to the pianist when the notes get played. But when the band comes in proper, we have a set tempo to it, and we are in 4/4. I really like this part though. Granted, I mean, like I said, it's the meat of the song. I think it takes up the most part of it. And it's a continuation of some of the ideas we heard earlier. We have acoustic instruments here. We have a drum set, does some phenomenal cymbal work. Absolutely love the ornamentation there. We have the pianist. We have the vocalist. We have some instruments. I know there's a trumpet that shows up twice. Maybe something else I'm forgetting. Yeah, I don't I can't remember if there was a guitar or not. I know there wasn't a trombone, there wasn't a saxophone, which is interesting. We've talked about this before. The sax is so heavily related to jazz for a lot of people, myself included, even though I know the saxophone isn't a jazz instrument per se. In fact, my first introduction to saxophones was classical music. I joined, classical band long before, I think 2 years before I started playing jazz trumpet. So, my introduction to saxophone wasn't even jazz, but it's just so closely tied to that in our culture, or at least Western culture, that it's really hard just to separate the two. And they did that here. They created some jazzy style of music. Oh, I need to get into that too. Some of the genre stuff here. They created some jazzy style of music without a saxophone. Pretty neat. Um, but yeah, I can't remember what else, anyways. And we enter into sort of like this more chill, laid back playing. We have the piano just laying down some ideas. We have the drums. It's kind of chill. We have a little bit of movement of extra momentum in the cymbals, but for the most part, it's a little chill and laid back. Halfway through, closer to the end, I noticed we switched from a typical drumstick on the snare to steel brushes. Adds a very nice flavor to the end of the track. I don't know when that happened. Completely slipped under my radar when that timbre change happened, but very neat. Something I'm gonna have to listen for if I go back to this one. Um, and the trumpet is playing some nice. Well, it kind of bounces between ornamental lines and trying to steal the spotlight from the vocals. And the vocalist just has this nice pop style of vocal melody going on, lead melody lines. And we kind of explore this idea as the foundation. But there's other ideas going on here as well. Well, as the beginning would suggest, electronic ideas. We have concepts that are panning. We have some that ping pong back and forth. We have even the trumpet. I had mentioned that instruments kind of rigidity of a trumpet. You don't typically see a trumpet player walking around on stage and changing their position relative to the audience. But here we are. The trumpet starts over here and plays like a little thing, and then pops up over here and plays a little thing. The piano bounces around. No one's carrying a whole a whole grand piano across the stage to achieve this effect at a live concert. Um, and we have the panning, we have the production effects, the panning, fades, all sorts of stuff like that. We have placement in the sound sphere on some of the acoustic instruments, and then of course we also have some of the electronic instruments. That really low sub bass tone comes back from the intro and shows up a couple of times. There's little ornamental ideas, just little tings and tots and whooshes. And it's just a very cool combination of jazz and electronic here. But that's not it, right? I talked about, or I said I would get to it. I guess we're going to do it right now, is genre. Techno, electronic, I think is evident. We've kind of gone over how the production techniques of techno are present here, as well as synthesizer tones. I think jazz is fairly present as well. Our entire band makeup is instruments that we would find in a jazz group. We can even look towards the drumming to say that it has a jazz style of drumming. It is a hair bit aggressive, but I'm going to chalk that up to the mix. It pops and it has energy and it's quite a bit louder than I think I would place the drums in the mix, so it feels a bit more rock style to me. But I think if this were live or if I listened to the raw recording, it would have a little bit more dynamic quality to it. It wouldn't be so flat, and it would also be more subtle in a lot of ways. I think this is jazz playing. It's just produced to be more flat and popping. So yeah, like I said, the core idea there is jazz. The trumpet, right? Interestingly, right? So the trumpet appears, and I do feel like the trumpet is soloing in some places, and there are some really interesting chordal choices that to me feel a bit spicier in the realm of jazz. However, the overall ideas that the trumpet is bringing feel kind of classical to me now that I think about it, especially as we were fading out and the trumpet's just kind of going ham over there. Yeah, that to me felt very classical. Did not feel jazzy in the structure of it, right? I don't know exactly what they were going for, but a lot of the cases here kind of bleeds between classical trumpet writing and jazz trumpet writing, and I think that's the thing, is that some sections sound a little more classical than the other, some sections sound a little jazzier than the other, and but the main thing is that most of it's really hard to pinpoint. It sort of just kind of leans one way or the other a little bit. um, so instead of like 50-50 where I can't really tell, it's like 60-40. Like, yeah, there's definitely a little bit more jazz influence here than other sections, but it's not like they went completely jazz. And the trumpet kind of embodies this interesting place there where it can kind of go into either realm. And since they're not swinging anything, were the drums swinging on the cymbals? I can't remember. I think a lot of this was had utilized straight eighth notes, so it didn't utilize swing eighth notes, and that's going to help obscure it a little bit more as well, because the swing is just swung eighth notes is a clear indicator of jazz because it's clearly playing in swing style, and without that here, the trumpet playing really relies on jazz chords to shine through as being, or any melody would rely on jazz chords to shine through as being jazz inspired. And instead, we kind of get some of those and we kind of don't, and it kind of leads it up into an awkward area, which also blends into our other melody, the vocals. The vocals here do not feel very jazzy to me at all. There are, again, just like the trumpet, some sections I'm like, yeah, tossing a little bit of some spicy chords there, bringing in, an interesting note into the mix that gives it that jazzy edge. But for the most part, it's a very comfortable mainstream style of melody writing, both in the form, the structure of it, when we change notes, how far of a gap we have between notes, um, but also just the overall palatability of it feels very pop to me. There isn't anything in it that I think is really challenging to listen to, which makes me think that the underlying chords are also not exactly challenging, which kind of leads me to think of this more in the terms of classical rather than jazz, because jazz, it's not that it's utilizes difficult chords or unpalatable chords, but they tend to have a very different flair to them. So, we have pop vocals and a possible mix between jazz and classical in our melody writing, including the trumpet. And we have jazz style of drumming and we have electronic sounds. And it's just all of this combined. But you know what? It works. I don't know why it works. I really can't tell you why all of these things come together and just sound good. This is a wonderful thing to listen to from start to finish. I still think the intro is a bit wonky overall, but it's still an interesting part of the song. I've already expressed what I enjoyed about it. And, this ending I think is just real gorgeous the way that it all comes together. Um, oh, another thing, real quick before we get into the lyrics, I think. Um, Oh, two more things. So one is the vocal production, talking about pop and electronic and all that. There was a time when the vocals split, and instead of having a centered vocal, we had one on each side. One, again, using great use of sound sphere and placement, and also just a very pop thing to do, which kind of takes also cues from electronic music of doing backing tracks and placing them in separate areas of the song. So yeah, once again, a little bit of pop ideas or electronic ideas coming into the production of it all, because they could have easily just left both vocals center panned and had them separated by pitch with the harmony, rather than actually physically separating two vocals out. And the other thing I want to bring up real quick, just because it's so cool, there are so few instances where I can bring this up, but I'm 95% sure the trumpet player is using a harmon mute right here, and the harmon mute is very cool because it adds dissonance to a trumpet. Not full on dissonance, not like clipping and overdrive and all that crunch that we can put on a guitar, but it does give the trumpet a bite. And that's what we heard in the second half of that final section of the track. And it kind of gives the trumpet this buzziness. I don't know if you heard that. Instead of the trumpet just having this real clear, warm tone, it comes off as kind of like a pitched bumblebee. And yeah, that's a pretty clear indicator of a harmon mute. Very cool thing. I love playing with the harmon mute. I think it gives it a fantastic texture. Not for everything, right? It's not like a normal mute that reduces the volume. This actually changes the timbre. You don't want to use it all the time, but when you need to use it, there is nothing else that fills the role. It is so good. Oh, and also, just because I'm a trumpet player, real quick, I know I said like one thing, then two things, now three things. Like, Bryan, just get with the lyrics. I don't know if that's what you're saying. Probably not. You're probably here for long form analysis. The longer I talk, the better. I don't know. I got to talk about this trumpet though, right? I'm a trumpet player. I love the trumpet. So when I hear stuff like this, I gotta bring it up, right? And I kind of wish I played every instrument, at least at like a mediocre level, so that I could comment on everything that I hear when I hear stuff like this. For other instruments, but I can't because I don't understand that they're unique ideas in other instruments or how they're being utilized. But here I can, so like I'm gonna do this. I'm so excited. The trumpet player utilizes a lot of really interesting tones. The first one, I don't really know what was going on there. So there was this section where it almost sounded like, all right, so on a guitar, you can install a kill switch, which I think like cuts off the electricity to the guitar somehow. Um, and you can utilize that to immediately cut off the tone without it allowing to fade out or to palm mute it, which is going to have less of a sharp cutoff to it. You can actually just turn it all off completely, and you can utilize that to create some very jagged, short, almost mechanical rhythmic sounds out of a guitar. You just hit the strum and then you use the kill switch to turn the power on and off. And yeah, and it creates these very sharp rhythmic ideas. And the trumpet player did that, and I have no idea what was going on there. I really don't. It was kind of bonkers. I think it was the first time we heard the trumpet too. The first time it did anything interesting melodically. I think, it came in with like a note and kind of had some nice dynamic element to it. Just kind of held the note out, raised the volume, brought it down a little bit. Just really, dressing up the atmosphere. But the first time the trumpet came in with an idea, I think was this rhythmic idea. It just took a note and just had this really bonkers short staccato, like super staccato notes on it, just super short. I have no idea how that happened. They also had this explosive hit to them. The attack was just very sharp, and again, I don't know what was going on there. Um, so with trumpet playing, there's actually quite a few different styles of utilizing your tongue to create attacks. I'm sure this is true for most instruments. The tongue is very important to creating or to forming sound on an instrument. But there's multiple ways to increase or decrease the attack on a note. So you can get something like a ta ta ta, which has a very harsh beginning of it, or like a la la la, which has a very soft hit on the beginning of it. And this was super super sharp, sharper than I think you could make with a ta type of tonguing technique. It almost sounded like they were utilizing pure air but that would not make it sharp enough lengthwise. That would be a little bit muddier for the length. Because when we double tongue, it's actually an interesting term because we don't use our tongue for both hits. So if you try to play a fast series of notes using just your tongue, you're gonna like it's you're gonna reach a point where you just can't move your tongue fast enough anymore, right? So one technique that I know of, I think there's a couple of double tonguing techniques for trumpet, but the one that I know of that I always utilized was to interchange my tuz, where the tongue touches the roof of the mouth and pulls off. You get the ta 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 with a guttural k, k, getting that K at the back of your throat. So you get tuku, 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 much faster than a single tongue. But the k is harsh. It's very harsh against the T. And it almost, like I said, it almost sounds like that, but it has that extra air on it because you're not using a muscle, a tongue muscle, to stop and start the air. You're actually using your diaphragm, which for most people, me included, is more difficult to control in short bursts. Even if you do you still have that extra bit of air that comes out after you make the sound, unlike with the t. It's more abrupt. So somehow they're getting the abrasiveness of the cuss tonguing, well, not really using your tongue, but the k attack with the shortness of a t tonguing, and I have no idea how that was happening. I hope you guys have as much fun listening to me doing this because I'm so excited about talking about this on this channel. It's just not a topic I get to do very often. Something else though, I really want to discuss about the trumpet playing. I had talked about how expressive it was, right? And this was during the harmony mute section. First of all, the harmony mute, like I said, is going to give it that buzziness. It's going to give it an interesting texture. But beyond that, there's some really fast playing in there. Absolutely love that. Very technical side. But also, I had talked about the expressiveness, and there are so many moments of playing around with the dynamic elements of volume. If you get a chance after this, go back and listen to that trumpet solo or the trumpet melody, whatever you want to call it, in the second half of that final section when, I mentioned the harmony mute coming in, and really listen to the way that they control the volume throughout the runs. It's done in two ways, actually, which is really neat. First, it is done by diaphragm, air control. The more air you put, well, not, the faster the air you put through, the louder it's going to be, right? And the opposite is true as well. You push air through slower, it's going to be, I don't know if faster and slower is the right word, but it's not pressure. It's not pressure. No, air pressure does not control volume. A lot of people get that mixed up. Just pushing more air through does not make it a louder sound. It's also going to make you winded faster, but a good musician can play loud for an extended period of time because it's not about the pressure you're putting through. I'm pretty sure it's about the speed you put it through at. It's about narrowing up the hole that the air is going through so that you're still sending a smaller amount of air, but because the pipe is smaller, the air moves faster. You're changing the amount of room that the air has to go. So we have this modulation of the volume physically with the air, with the diaphragm, right? But there's also this really cool thing. So trumpets have valves. Okay, I was going to get my trumpet out, but man, we're already at 40 minutes on this video. Okay, so trumpets have valves and you push them down, right? And they actually have quite a bit of travel to them. And the way that it works is that there's holes in the valves that allow the air to go through different tubes. If you've ever looked at the trumpet, there's just a lot of tubing all the way around. The valves control which tubes the air goes through, and I think the science behind it is that the longer the tube, it changes the note at the end for some reason. I don't actually know why it works the way it works. But the idea is that if you push one half of the way down rather than all the way down, you're only opening up one of the valves or one of the tubes halfway. Some of the air is just not making it through. And so it not only changes the volume of it because half of the air is making it through to the end of the trumpet, but it also changes the timbre of it. It sounds muffled. And this trumpet player is mixing in some of these half valves into their playing to give it this extra bit of muffledness against the brighter tones that they're getting um, with the full valves, fully opened or fully closed. And it also sounds like they're mixing them up a little bit. So, like for just for instance, a middle A is going to be valves 1 and 2. But what if you do valve 1 all the way down and valve 2 halfway down? You know, what is that going to sound like? And I think that's what's happening here because there's moments where I feel like I'm hearing both full and muffled sounds coming out of the trumpet, but it's also being modulated by the Harmon mute, which is it's just bonkers. Just thinking about everything that's going on here, but the end result, because of all these little micro techniques that are being implemented, is that the trumpet playing is so emotive. It provides just this really neat ride for the listener to be along. It's not the trumpet player isn't just playing the music on the paper. They're finding ways to express themselves in those notes and to give it personality that another instrument wouldn't if they were given the same notes, or even that a different musician given the same trumpet and sheet music wouldn't produce. This is something very particular to the trumpeter, which kind of brings in that jazz element because, like I said, it does kind of feel solo-y in a couple of sections, and I think this is why. It's just a very personal sound that the trumpet player is bringing. Um, yeah, I think that's going to be it for the trumpets. Just, absolutely love it. So we're going to get into some lyrics right here, wrap this video up, and yeah, that's it for today then. So we got, oh, there's like nothing here. Roads never ending, I walk for ages, I must be the only one. Ashes is all I've kept from ancient time. Should I drop the line? Nights never ending, nights never ending, nights never ending. So the night never ends, the road never ends, just walks forever by themselves. Even says I must be the only one. Ashes is all I've kept from ancient time. Should I drop the line? I mean, it almost sounds like somebody who's been around for a long time. All they have from their past life is, ashes. You know, we could look at this in a very strictly literal sense. And this is an immortal being who has gone through many ages. And, the road will never end ahead of them. They will continue to feel the heartache of those that they love being mortal and eventually passing on and them not. All they have left is their ashes. Um, I don't know what the should I drop the line is though, but I mean, it could also, we could take this metaphorical and instead of just looking at it from a supernatural immortal being, just somebody who's in a different era, you know? People often say, that was a past life that I had done that. And they're talking, 10, 15, 20 years prior, maybe even more than that, depending on their age, when they were just a different person. They've changed so much since then. All they have of that past life is memories and ashes. It could be their own ashes. It could be a version of themselves that they have incinerated, gotten rid of, but can't get rid of, right? It's still part of them. Maybe that's the should I drop the line part. I don't know. Kind of makes me think like they're leaving a trail of ashes, breadcrumb style. Just drop the line, completely divorce yourself from your past. Put that break in the line, no longer carry that weight around. But there's also an isolating element in this that I don't know where it's coming from. I walk for ages and I must be the only one. I don't know. It's an interesting set of lyrics. That it's a bit cryptic, but I think it fits with some of the vibes of the track. They're just kind of like I said, it's a very chill, laid back track. It's got a bit of a darkness to it, and just kind of works well with these lyrics, kind of presenting that same kind of emotional vibe. So, yeah, I think we're going to end it there. Those are my thoughts on the Kilimanjaro Darkjazz Ensemble's All Is One. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this one. If you agree with me, disagree, anything you'd like to add to the conversation, anything you'd like to correct me on. Let me know if I should talk more about the trumpet. I don't know. Above that, though, head into the description box. You can find a link to Linktree in there. It takes you to this menu with everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch, join the Patreon, join the Discord, follow me on Twitter, a bunch of other stuff. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for today. Tomorrow, patrons, there's a live stream. I'm going to try to get that out for everybody, the rest of the community early in the week, sometime between Monday and Wednesday, if it's blocked. If it's not blocked, it'll be available Sunday night. EST, of course. I guess that would be Monday morning for some people. And then on Monday, we return for our typical theme stuff and some more special selections. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.